Such a wonderful and nice affirmation to talk about courage, specifically focusing on the fact that we are part of the ever-conscious, super-conscious God, and therefore no one can harm me. But it is also interesting to be talking about courage in India, and especially in a city like Delhi, where you see people full of courage when they drive on the roads, right? None of them worry about being caught by the police, none of them worry about banging another car. We are all very courageous when we drive on the road, right? But if you think deeper, it's actually a manifestation that we see at a superficial level of people driving courageously on the road without worrying about what's going to happen to them. Actually, it's fear, it's not courage. And usually we associate courage to be perhaps an opposite of fear, being two opposite sides of the same coin. That's actually in some cases, especially in this superficial courage that we're talking about, is actually the same thing as fear. So courage and fear are the same sides of the coin when we especially look at the superficial courage that I just talked about. Because think of it, let's say I just crossed a red light, right? And one thought could be that the person does not worry about whether the police will catch him or not, and that's why it's courage. But actually it's fear. I fear that I would reach late to office. I fear that my colleagues and my bosses may not actually take this as nicely, and they would not want me to come late, and that's why I jumped the traffic light. I didn't jump the traffic light because I have the courage. I jumped the traffic light because I fear the consequences of it. There are a lot of people I've seen who drive really fast and rash on the roads because they want to get out of it, because they fear being on the road. And it manifests as if they are courageous to drive rash. But it is an inherent fear that we drive on the road so rashly because there is a fear because of which we have to exhibit certain characteristics that at times look like courage. So it's a very interesting point of view, but mostly for the kind of courage that is superficial in nature, right? And all of these qualities such as fear, courage, calmness, peace, joy, all of them are within our body. And it is so nicely explained by Swami Kriyananda ji in his book on the essence of Bhagavad Gita, wherein he mentions that a human body is actually a nation, and it has a population of people, and these people are actually characteristics. So we think of our body as consisting of a large number of characteristics: courage, fear, peace, anxiety, aggressiveness, pain, and so on and so forth. And that's how we are all born with. But at times when we grow, there are situations that we face, and when we face those situations, and actually more importantly, when we react to those situations, we align to one of these characteristics slowly over time. And then we develop a specific set of features or characteristics that start to define ourselves as bodies. But inherently, we have all these qualities within us, and it is a choice that we have on which characteristics that we need to develop, which characteristics do we need to inherit, so that we form our own what we call as character. And as an example, if initially, let's say, someone hurt our ego, so there are two different ways of reacting towards it, right? Maybe we can be very aggressive and courageous to fight against that ego, and if we do that, then our courage characteristics or aggressiveness characteristics starts to develop. If someone hurts my ego, the other point is that I become fearful, I am frightened. So then the kind of characteristics that I develop in my body are of fear, are of jealousy maybe. So we are developing these characteristics as and when we get to situations and how we react to these situations. So it is important that over a period of time, we are kind of creating this population within our nation which starts to define us. And it is also said that nation is defined by its people, right? So the characteristics of our body, which is the nation, is defined by who we populate more, if we populate more of the right courage, of the true courage, then we are going to have those qualities within us which will help us go further in our spiritual path here. And then there are very different types of courage. Of course, the superficial one is not something that I was talking about, but something nice to relate to when we are talking about courage, especially in this context. But then there is the courage that Kriyanandaji mentions in this affirmations book itself is a blind courage. I follow blindly a particular path without knowing the consequences of what I am going to do or what I am going to fall into. So that's blind courage. I don't even know that the activity that I am going to do requires a lot of courage or requires less courage, or it has its consequences or not. That is blind courage, of course dangerous, right? Then there is a passive courage. That's what Kriyanandaji mentions. A passive courage is something wherein I know that this is the consequence, still I am going to do it because I have that courage. It's like saying that I am wanting to climb a tough mountain peak in a weather that is known to me. So if I wish to climb Mount Everest in a weather that is very predictable, that is passive courage, because we already know the difficulties that we have to reach in order to attain that particular height. On the other hand, active courage is one wherein there could be situations while I am climbing this mountain, but there would be changes in the weather, and active courage helps us adapt to the situations in a way so that we can overcome whatever difficulties that we face within ourselves. So these are the different kinds of courage, and then there is a very different level of courage, which is the divine courage, which is perhaps the most relevant to us here, which is the courage that is required for us to carry on this spiritual path. And when we talk of courage, one of the most written about story with respect to courage is the one which is called as David and Goliath. So this is, I think, about 1200 BC story, wherein the story started with the fact that there was an area that time, it still exists, between the Israel and Palestinian borders, so which had mountains on two sides and a large valley, and the valley actually provided access to the seas, and seas were used to do transportation, business and so on. So that valley had a very economic importance to communities living around that place. And one hill was occupied by Israelis, the other hill was occupied by Palestinians, and everyone wanted to control the valley. So it was a very important piece, right? So once both the Israelis and Palestinians reached on top of their hill, and they wanted to conquer the valley. Now whosoever goes down the hill would have to walk up, and we are talking about 1200 BC, right? There were no airplanes and so on, so you had to walk up to the other hill to fight with the opponent. But if you walk up, the opponent has a good chance of striking against you, so you wouldn't want to do that. So many days happened, and both the armies were on one of the opposite sides on two different hills, no one having the daring to walk to the valley, and then it's kind of a deadlock situation. So then Palestinians actually broke the deadlock, and what they did was they sent their most strong soldier, 6'9" or maybe even higher, very strongly built, with a lot of iron masks and so on, which they used to have during those times. And this person walked over to the valley, and then he challenged the Israelis, saying that I am the strongest person representing my army, send your strongest person, we'll have a one-on-one duel, and whosoever wins, if we lose, then we are going to walk back, if you lose, you should walk back. And that time there used to be a lot of honor and pride in terms of these kind of fights, so rather than doing the bloodbath of thousands of people, you would settle in with just one-on-one duel between two strong people. So these Israelis saw this guy, and his name was Goliath. So Goliath walks into the valley, very strong, very powerful, strong voice, and he says, come to me, and whosoever comes to me, I'm going to tear you apart and give you to birds and so on and so forth. And he keeps standing there. And then there's discussion among Israelis that who's going to face this strong person, because he looks really strong, he has a very strong voice, and he's standing fearlessly in this particular valley, so it's definitely has a lot of willpower. So none of the Israeli soldiers had the daring to come and fight with this particular person. So, but then there's one shepherd who's not a soldier, but he was just a shepherd. He says that I would want and fight with this Goliath. So the Israeli minister said that no, you are just a shepherd and this person is very strong, I would not want to risk you. But the shepherd insists a lot, and he says that I have fought with lions to take my sheep away from them when the lion has caught the sheep, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to fight, I really want to fight. And somehow the minister agrees and the shepherd walks in. And this is a very famous story, most of all. But you know what happened later on was that the shepherd, the minister said that take on some armor, take on some strong weapons with you. And the shepherd says, I don't want anything. He just took 5 stones with him. And then what he did was he ran towards Goliath, and he ran with a string, and on that string he had these stones, and he just continued to increase the speed of his stones and then flung them off to Goliath. And from a far enough distance he hit Goliath directly. The stones hit in his forehead, and then Goliath could not survive, and therefore the Israelis won the war. It's a very famous story. Now what it tells us is that at times, so this person was David, and this person who could not, the strong guy was Goliath. So David and Goliath, right? Lots of stories around that. But what it actually tells us is, then the story goes into deeper into telling what happened there. And what happened was that during those times there used to be 3 types of you can say armies. One was the infantry, which used to travel by foot. Then there was the cavalry, which used to travel on horses. And then there was the stone slingers, who would from a distance itself try and throw stones at high speeds to the other army, so that they could hit other people, and so on and so forth. So this shepherd was actually a stone slinger, and Goliath was an infantryman. Stone slingers have historically been known to be more powerful than infantrymen, because infantrymen have to physically walk to the place. Stone slingers can fight from a long distance. Goliath actually said, come to me and I will tear you apart and give you to birds and so on. He didn't say I will walk to you. Goliath was a bulky guy. It was not easy for him to move fast. He was not such a flexible person. So Goliath was an infantryman. Goliath was an inflexible person, and so all the odds were actually in favor of the shepherd. But when we were talking in the first 2 minutes in the story, we felt that all the odds were in favor of Goliath, because he's strong, he looks big. And that's what happens a lot of times. Lot of our problems are not as big as they seem to be. We in fact are more courageous to defeat those problems if we go deeper. If we know these facts that Goliath was an infantryman, if we could increase our consciousness to the fact that Goliath is bulky, he is big, which means he is also inflexible. If we can increase our consciousness to know more about the problem, most of the times what we'll realize is that the problem is smaller than the courage that I have to fight against it. And that's where the concept of David and Goliath story fits in so well, that whenever we need courage, we need to look at the problem for which we need the courage. Most of the times, if we go deeper, if we increase our consciousness, if we increase our awareness, we'll realize that we already have the courage to defeat that particular problem. So later on, this David and Goliath story says that it was more or less obvious that the shepherd will always defeat Goliath. Why would Palestinians have actually sent Goliath rather than someone else to be their representative, and so on and so forth? And the whole story spins completely in a different manner if we just increase our consciousness. And that is what we are also taught in our meditation, right? If we have problems, if we have questions, we need to increase our level of consciousness. We need to raise our level of consciousness, and then those problems go away. Because with more awareness, we would have realized that these are not problems at all. So that's definitely a huge value of courage, of being able to understand problems in our daily lives. And then coming back to the divine faith, so we talked about the three types of faith, but the most important most important courage is the divine courage, which is perhaps what we need to do a good job of doing self-realization in our daily lives, in our meditation practices, and so on and so forth. Right? And then once Kriyananda ji was asked what is courage, and then in response to this, he said so wonderfully this particular sentence which I am going to read. He says, do you have the courage to come to God exactly as you are, with all your faults? Now imagine God at our doorsteps. He just rang the bell and he's calling us on the door. I mean, forget God, if our neighbor also comes and rings a doorbell, right? We first get ready, we wear good clothes, we make sure that we are right, we are appropriate and so on, and then we go. Do we have the courage to face God with all our faults as we are? If yes, that is the true courage. That is divine courage. And to ascertain that, Kriyananda ji also mentions that we should take life as it is. We should take situations as they are coming. They are not good, they are not bad. They are just as what they are. Because this life, this world exhibits duality in a very strong manner. Right? If we see the waves of the sea, if we see a high wave, we are going to have a low wave for sure. If we see a low wave, we are going to have a high wave for sure. So if we have good times, we are going to have bad times. So it's very important to take life as it comes, and that is what develops divine courage within us. Kriyananda ji also mentions this such a cute story. He says that when he was about 13-year-old or so, he moved to America from Romania. So he had a different accent than Americans, and there was some person who for some reason did not like this specific accent from Kriyananda ji, and Kriyananda ji was like about 40 kgs or so, and this person who didn't like Kriyananda ji's accent was huge, 70 kgs and so on, and then he just decided that I don't like his accent, I just want to bash him up. So he went to Kriyananda ji and he started beating Kriyananda ji, and Kriyananda ji mentions it so calmly, and he started beating Kriyananda ji, and Kriyananda ji tried to avoid him, he tried to reduce the injuries that this other person would have inflicted on him, and then but he didn't react, he didn't fight against him. So this person initially started to fight, and then he saw that there is no reaction here, he felt amused, and then he went back. So when Kriyananda ji's friends got to know, they said that you should have asked for help. Kriyananda ji said, why should have I asked for help? I was not afraid. Such a wonderful and so nicely narrated story. If I was being beaten by someone, I would have felt embarrassed. But Kriyananda ji lived those words. Take life as it comes. If he wants to beat me, that's fine. That's what life is coming to me. I'm not going to react to it. And the person never hit Kriyananda ji again. He was amused. What should he do? In some sense, he kind of lost in front of the courage that Kriyananda ji exhibited. Just take life as it is. If this is a low wave, a high wave is going to come there. And therefore, we need to exhibit the courage to accept and face that low wave. And when we do that, we are going to exhibit this divine courage characteristics wherein we will be able to face God with all our faults. Because we are now not attaching ourselves to those faults. We are not saying that these faults are mine. We are not saying that these good characteristics are mine. All we are saying is that we are sons of God. And we are just facing this drama which is exhibiting in front of us. We are just watching it. We are not meant to react to situations. We are not meant to be affected by situations. If we do that, we are not attached to them. And then we will easily face God. We won't worry that this is my fault, or we won't worry that this is me, I am not correct, I am not right, I am not as good. We won't have any of those thoughts. We are sons of God. God is coming to us. We'll just go open the door. Maybe that's what we can try when we open the door for our neighbors next. But this is also, at times what happens is that we have a tendency to justify ourselves. So when we have faults, we attach a lot of I and myself with those faults. We try and justify those, that yes, I did this, but that situation demanded that, and therefore I had to do it. Next time I won't do it, and so on and so on. There's no need to justify. We have this inherent tendency to justify, but there's no need to do that if we are ready to face the consequences of it. Yes, I did that action. It could be good, the low way. It could be bad, the low way, or it could be good, the high way. We know that some actions that we are going to do are going to be not as good, some actions are going to be not as bad. As long as we are not attached to that, it increases our divine courage to face God as we are, and therefore be more tuned with God and good. Having talked of this, it is also important to see how we increase our courage, increase our divine courage. And one of the most important things that Yogananda ji mentioned is that courage has roots in faith. If we have deep faith in God, then our courage will automatically increase. It's such a wonderful saying, I don't remember the exact words, that I live in the temple of God and no one can harm me there. And that's the faith that we have. That's the divine faith that we have in God. One other practical thing that we can do to increase the courage characteristics in our whole body is to be with people who exhibit more energy, people who themselves are courageous. And actually Yogananda ji had said that at times the environment is stronger than your own will. So maybe I feel that I am not courageous enough to do that, which itself is in some ways not the right thing to do, because all of us are courageous to do everything, and because we need to manifest that God in us and we need to associate ourselves with that God. If we are doing that, then God can do everything, and therefore we should have that tendency. But it is always also good to be in touch with people who are courageous, exhibit those characteristics, and that environment at times provides courage to us. Environment is often stronger than will, as Yogananda said. So this is definitely a wonderful topic to understand the different types of courages, to understand the value of courage in the path of spirituality. And there is a wonderful book by Yogananda ji on how to attain courage, calmness and peace. So that has also lots of wonderful insights into how to make our soul more courageous and more focused towards the path of God and self-realization. So this is definitely a wonderful topic and lots to study on this, but let's end this webinar by just these 2 points, that maybe we can be with more people who exhibit courage, because environment is stronger than will, and get more faithful to our paths, to our gods, to our gurus, because courage has roots in faith. Thank you.